Because sir, we'll go live in 10 seconds. Perfect.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bhageshri Katre from IITM NVIS. Welcome you all for the celebration of International Day for Biological Diversity 2022. This day is celebrated to increase awareness about importance of biodiversity and related issues. It is celebrated on 22nd May to commemorate the adoption of the Convention on Biological Diversity by United Nations General Assembly on 22nd May 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit. The day is celebrated every year with different themes. This year, the theme of this day is We Are a Part of the Solution. This theme highlights the role that each of us can play in protecting biodiversity. Now, I request Dr. Murthy, Scientist F and NVIS Coordinator, to give brief background of the program. Dr. Murthy.
Thank you, Bhageshri. Director IITM Dr. Krishnan, the Speaker of the Day, Dr. Mahesh Ravindra Shetkar, Assistant Professor Biology, COEP, and other online participants, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I welcome you all on behalf of NVIS on this occasion of International Biological Diversity Day. Before I'll give you some introduction about the NVIS. This is a resource partner for Ministry of Environment and Forest, and so IITM is one of the RPs spread across India. There are about 40 to 50 resource partners are there. So IITM's theme is air pollution and climate change. As part of this NVIS, we spread awareness about the environmental issues among the public through webinars like today's, and then conduct various quiz competitions, drawing competitions to school students as well as college students. And also we conduct some training courses on green skill development. One is air pollution, another one is emission inventory. We have been doing this for last so many years. Today's topic is on theme is we are part of the solution. So that's what biological diversity says. So that means each and everyone are part of the solution. Unless we put in effort, we will not be able to bring back the system to environmental equilibrium, because we are responsible for its deterioration, as we all know. So if you see, our mother planet Earth accommodates about 87 lakh species of live forms, out of which about 82% belong to plant species. And then 12% belongs to insects, and then there are microbes and all many very small living forms. And then comes to humans. We are just a minuscule 0.01% of the total population inhabiting the planet yet. So we are negligible compared to their population. So if we are not there, nothing is going to happen to other creatures. But if they are not there, we will face a food crisis. We will not be able to survive. So the moral of the story is, if you want to survive, you have to see that they also survive in a better environment. We usually talk about the extinction of big animals like our dinosaurs, tigers, lions, and some birds, some frogs. But there are many invisible which are contributing a lot to our survival. Take the case of bees. It is known that bees population is contributing about one third of world food. So if they are not there, we will be at risk of without food. So that's why our ancestor says, "Rucho Rashyat Rashyadaha." If you want to be happy and survive, you have to save trees. In the same way, we also say that uh, 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 all kingdoms means animal kingdom, then plant kingdom, as well as human kingdom, all have to live in harmony, helping each other. No one is superior or inferior because we are all interdependent and inhabiting the mother planet Earth. There are so many invisible microbes in the soil which constantly putting effort to convert whatever residues are there to minerals, and then they give it to plants, and then we survive on plants. So the each and everyone should be aware of the biodiversity and its significance. Okay, and today's talk is about climate change, wetland, and biodiversity. And before I hand over to Bhagyashree, I would like to thank the today's speaker, Dr. Mahesh Ravindra Shindekar, for accepting our invitation to give a talk on this special topic on wetland and biodiversity. Thank you everyone, and over to Bhagyashree.
Thank you, sir. Now we will move to the main part of the event, that is webinar. Before starting the webinar, I would like to request Dr. Priyank, Program Officer, IITM NVIS, to introduce our chief guest. Dr. Priyank.
Thank you, Bhagesh. So we welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Shindikar sir. He is the Assistant Professor of Biology at CUAP Pune for IITM NBIS International Day for Biological Diversity 2022 webinar. Dr. Shindikar is an accomplished. He has completed his formal education with PhD in botany. He works as an academic and research coordinator and student welfare officer at University of Pune. He is the assistant editor for Maharashtra State Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. He is also a committee member for curriculum design and translation for the course on environmental state for HSC level. He is an expert member of Maharashtra Coastal Zone Management Authority, Government of Maharashtra. He is an expert member for Wetland Redressal Committee, Open Division, Government of Maharashtra. And additionally, Dr. Shindikar is also a consultant to various government and non-governmental agencies working in the areas of environmental impact assessment and environmental management system. We are glad and excited to have Dr. Shindikar today here with us.
Thank you, Dr. Priyank. With this short introduction, I would like to request Dr. Mahesh Shindikar to address our viewers. Dr. Shindikar.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Murthy sir, for setting the tone for this entire discussion with the philosophy for biodiversity. So also giving the mathematics, all the figures, everything that is essential for a layman now to understand about what is very important for our life and where we stand in this entire organization on this beautiful planet. What should be our role? What should be there on our shoulders, because we are getting the privilege to get everything in terms of qualitative and quantitative means from our forefathers. It is now our responsibility to do something for the next generation. Thank you, Bhagyashree Madam, also for giving idea about the celebration. And as rightly pointed out, we have to find out what we can do as a layman, as a person, as an individual, what should be our role for our planet. So also take this opportunity to thank Dr. Priyank for taking efforts to making this beautiful platform available for me to interact using this virtual mode. So thank you so much, everyone. Now let me share the screen. So please confirm once it is shared. Is it visible, sir?
Yes, it is visible.
Yes. Okay, so thank you so much. And again, let me at this juncture wish each one of you a very great day, which we have celebrated yesterday. All the details are already explained. It is Convention on Biological Diversity as a follow program to the first kind of meeting. Uh, and before we set the agenda for 21st century, this was decided to do something for our biological wealth that we have in terms of plants, animals, microorganisms, and how they can save us our own life, all our needs as well as our aspirations, how can be fulfilled because of this. In today's world where we call as digital partners, I think it is essential to understand the weightage in terms of hits. This generation will always talk about your popularity in terms of the views or hits. And that is why generally I started all my sessions on these particular topics to start with what is the average number of hits, what are the number of websites available with particular phrases, with particular terms. So if you screen these three terms, biodiversity, climate change and wetlands, all these three terms we are it is beyond our normal routine calculation. Huge number of billions of hits we can find within the minutes time. So within no time we are getting these many popularity for these glamorous words. So thank you once again, and let me begin with today's discussion. We are trying our best to tie up three different concepts today. Climate change, no matter, because that is the mandate for the parent organization IITM to talk about weather and go step ahead to talk about climate. What concisely takes us the patterns that are changing in the weather, but in a way we are connected with this concept, inseparable part of our life, that is climate change. So how wetlands are interacting with this particular natural phenomena that is taking out, and no doubt, though it is a natural, it is anthropogenic driven phenomena, we can say, and how it is correlated with the theme for which we are today together, that is celebration of biological wealth that we have on our planet. Let me quickly go through uh, Convention on Biological Diversity, what they have explained yesterday, and a very quick theme on which we can really understand. I hope the uh, less than a minute's theme. I think, I hope this is visible to everyone.
Yes, sir, we can see it.
Yes, thank you so much. So it is talking right from the polar areas to forests to different biomes to coastal areas, talking about animals from water, coral reefs, talking about plants, pollinators, agriculture, people, everywhere, whatever diversity, and inseparable part of this diversity is human being, as rightly explained by sir. So this is where we have to share, and the theme that is given for this 2022 is building a shared future for all life. So we should not really become selfish, and instead of having whatever limited what kind of understanding, we have to adopt the broader view, version, perception, to count each and every aspect, each and every part, each and every species, individual, member, ecosystem, landscapes, everything in this concept of biological diversity. So this is a very remarkable thing that is happening today, that every time we are discussing, right from auto rickshaw driver, he also will say that yes, 10 15 years before, he has never experienced this temperature in the city, he has never experienced such kind of drought situation or floods. in some parts of our country. So all that is happening is a panoramic event, and that event is directly, indirectly related with all of us, and that creates problem. Many a times it creates challenges before us, our life, our survival. But at the same time, in our day-to-day life also, right from the availability, a very simple observation, I think we will go ahead and talk about that observation, especially in last 2 years where we were struggling for the smallest component of this biodiversity, which is invisible also, but all developed world, everybody is could not find any big solution to fight against this particular COVID-19. So a smallest component of biodiversity can take us on stake, and that is very significant aspect of biodiversity, that as said we have to respect each and every component. As we have our right to sustain on this planet, each and every organism has equal right to sustain on this earth. And that is why on 22nd day of May we celebrate World Biodiversity Day. Now, let me focus on two ideas that are prescribed by United Nations. The decade which we have recently completed talks about a decade for biodiversity, and now we have recently entered into a decade wherein we are celebrating something on ecosystem restoration. Now, all these terms are very important. As everybody knows, biodiversity, it is a contractual term. It is a contract of two different terms, biological and diversity. So whenever I say biological, it takes care of all the plants as a producers, organisms, animals as a consumers, and microorganisms as decomposers. So all the three basic elements, three pillars of biodiversity, and whatever variety and variability. So two terms are very important whenever we are talking about biodiversity, that is variety and variability. You go to the market and you get different types of rice and wheat, you get different types of brinjals, you get different types of roses, and all that is possible is because there is variability exist in the species. So variety and variability becomes very important keywords whenever we are talking about biological diversity. So just we have celebrated these 10 years. There were global efforts, there were follow-up actions by the nations, by the regions, and that is where we have done something as our moral responsibility for biodiversity. And in this years after industrialization, whatever scale at which we have destroyed different types of larger, what we can say, scale, a landscape of where biodiversity exists, thrive, that is known as an ecosystem. So whatever knowingly or unknowingly damage has happened with ecosystems, this is right chance that we should do something. We have to restore. We can bring back that particular system near to its natural position, and that's why we have to spend the coming years in this decade for doing something towards restoration of an ecosystem. With this, let us quickly go through some of the important aspects. Whenever we are talking about biodiversity, a simple triangle will take us some ideas or share some ideas. We have biodiversity, we have climate change at the other corner, and the third angle is occupied by good quality of life. So all these three aspects of our life, if you try to understand, so climate change will certainly have impact on both these aspects, that is biodiversity and our own quality of life. At the same time, good quality of life demands more and more utilization of natural resources, and may lead or may encourage, facilitate the climate change. At the same time, if you want to unravel the interaction between biodiversity and good quality of life, we have several benefits of biodiversity, right from our food, fodder, medicine. Even today, we cannot have any synthetic medicine as an option. 85% of today's known medicines are from directly obtained from microorganism, plants, and animals. But at the same time, this good quality of life, infrastructural or developmental needs and greeds in many cases has a very negative impact shown on biological diversity. This climate change also impacts biological wealth, diversity, spatially as well as temporally. And in the entire process of evolution, at several occasions, we have understood that geological, climatic, all these episodic events have knowingly or unknowingly damaged the biological diversity. There are two important responses that are given by the biological wealth to this great concept of climate change, and that is adaptation. So, as there will be change, biological or living entities, organisms will try their best to adapt with the changing surrounding, with the changing climatic conditions. And they, to certain extent, some of these biological elements will try to mitigate, compensate something as the impacts they are very importantly affecting this biological diversity. As I said, this biological diversity or wealth we can anticipate at three different levels: plants as producers, animals as consumers, and microorganisms as decomposers. All these three elements have their very specific role that is assigned to them. You cannot exclude any of this, otherwise, the whole system will be collapsed, and that we have understood in various occasions with various case studies and examples. Any damage to any of the members, we cannot have sustained life possible on this planet. This entire biodiversity we can study at n number of levels, right from the level of this uh, molecules or atoms. We can go up to level of cells, tissues, organs, systems, but three very accepted levels at which we can generally express this biological diversity can be studied at three. Lowest, we have genetic diversity, which is expressed in the form of DNA and RNA that everybody knows. Next level is the level which is used at its maximum, that is species level diversity. What are the different species that are present? What are the different individuals? Whatever the differences that exist in two closely related species, how the species coexist, what are the different forms of their interaction, all that is studied, all that is understood by the scientists through their work. At little higher level, as I said, we can understand this biological diversity at the level of an ecosystem. Ecosystem is nothing but a very organized logical arrangement and pattern of all the biological wealth doing their own business of production, of utilization, as well as decomposition. So the entire nutrient system, except the sunlight that is made available by the sun, everything is managed in very sustainably, very concretely in this very important combo pack in today's language, we can say. What is the impact, possible impact of this climate on biological diversity? As we have seen, we can have some impacts at the level of individuals or species. We can have pronounced impacts at the level of population, and so also on the ecosystems. Now, here, whenever we are talking about lower levels of species and individuals, it can affect the rate at which they are grown, what is the growth, and that starts well within the petri plate of microorganisms, their growth, to the growth of insects, to the growth of pests, to the growth of viruses, to the growth of animals, to the growth of plants. Many a times, if you compare, most of you have heard about C3 and C4 type of photosynthesis that is followed by different group of plants. What is the response of these plants to this changed climate? So it is assumed that C3 plants, like dicotyledons, they have more response or more sturdy response that they can give to the changing climatic conditions. And C4 plants, mostly they are grasses, and they will show lesser response to this climatic change. But scientific reports are coming up these days. In recent years, people have found that yes, this assumption may be wrong. C4 plants may give better response. The rate at which the let us compare the weightage in polar regions or ecosystems. The weight of the organisms has been drastically reduced. The reproductive success, survival, germination rate, strategies that they are adopted by the species, all that will be changing because of changing climate. There will be change in the behavior. So what in recent years people have observed, they were waiting for winter to go to nearest wetlands and to observe the very attractive and beautiful species of bird, but they may not get it in the prescribed time frame, but they have to wait long. And even or early summer, you can expect the entry of these uh, migratory birds species. Flamingo is the best example for that. So the entire observation time, depending livelihood, depending activities like tourism, everything has changed because of this very important event of climate change. So it is a very big level choreographer, and all the species, populations, their genes, ecosystems are nothing but the actors and co-actors, dancers, to whom they have to set their own tone and adjust themselves to the tune of the climate change. Population, on the other side, the size of population. There is a drastic control on population size. Some of the species will be preferred because of this climate change. A structure that also has found to be changed in various regions of the globe. A structure has got changed with respect to insects, with respect to birds, with respect to butterflies, with respect to mammals. The A structure has been shattered because of this particular climate change. Sex ratio, male to female ratio, that is responsible to have reproductive success. The flow of gene in the nearest or closest populations or subpopulations, the interaction between species has also got changed because of this severe climatic impacts, maybe with respect to temperature, with respect to rainfall, humidity, wind, direction. A number of aspects are involved as a what we can say expression of climate change or the different episodes. The composition of an ecosystem, there will be shift. So this wetlands are shifting to grasslands, or grasslands are shifting to forest, or forests are declined and converting themselves to grasslands. All such type of ecosystem shifts have been observed globally in this with this reference of climate change. The composition, and basically what is very important to run this entire ecosystem, that is interaction, positive, negative, neutral, all different types of interactions between the species. So this is just for our understanding. We are separating and observing these impacts at the level of species, population, or ecosystem. But putting them together, ecosystem will certainly have some impact on the behavior of the individual, that will have some impact on the population structure of the uh, group of species, and all these are interacting and interrelated, interdependent, dynamic, what we can say role players in this concept of climate change. Now, whenever we are talking about doing something, we have different approaches and methods to do something for this conservation of biodiversity. The moment you go to any of the religious place, you cannot directly go and enter to near to the uh, god or goddess or any other the central area. For that, you have to follow some rules, and this is the strategy that is observed in case of protected area theme. So wherein the natural areas are protected, by giving some legal protection to such areas in order to conserve the species. And right from our philosophic or religious things, we have been trained in Indian philosophy to respect Pancha Mahabhutas. We are here respecting not only living creatures but also the elements of earth, elements of wind, water, everything. And in biodiversity, mostly we have millions of gods and goddesses, and each of these god is associated with some plants, some animals. And this is how in olden period of time this biodiversity was introduced to the local people in order to make them understand the significance, in order to understand the positive benefits that people are drawing out of this biological wealth that they have. We have in situ type of method, we have ex situ in case where in situ protection and conservation is not possible. We can take some samples of these organisms, take them away from their natural locations and try to protect them. Nowadays, there is an effort going on to have some combined efforts of in situ and ex situ type of conservation. Like the best example for this is watershed development, wherein we can maintain some of the aspects, some of the elements of biodiversity in situ. So also we can add some aspects of ex situ, wherein good amount of biological representation from the surrounding region, which ought to get damaged because of developmental activities, can be transformed there, and we can have ex situ type of conservation. So all these approaches are very important just to understand that nothing exists in isolation. Unlike our political boundaries between countries, nature observes everything very gradually. And that is the beauty of nature, wherein just for our understanding, different circles are shown in this diagram, wherein the first is talking about different types of forest, right from the hilltops or mountain or plateau areas, then whatever the slopes that we have. And second is talking about the scrubland, the grasslands, the savannas. Third will talk about the slopes. Fourth will talk about the ocean system. Fifth will talk about the inland wetlands. Fifth, the next will talk about the anthromes, which is very nice term coined in these days, indicated in red color polygons. So here we will find that there is undoubtedly intervention of human activities positively, negatively, neutrally contributing into best time. And we have the natural areas, wilderness areas. We are changing the natural setup. We are doing something with the habitats, and thus indirectly we are playing with whatever existing biological diversity. The scene, as sir said in the beginning, the large scale species like elephant, tiger, crocodile, we can easily monitor the change that is happening. But what happens at the level of microorganisms, what happens with the insects, is very difficult for us to understand and manage. For that, we have considered some of the aspects of this biological diversity in isolation, and one of the prominent part of this is wetlands. And every second day of February, we celebrate in respect of the Ramsar Convention. For the first time, the representatives of around 170 odd countries gathered together. It is one of the oldest international gathering for the protection of wetlands. And if you keenly observe the definition of wetlands, they have tried their best to cover each and every corner on this planet, which has intersection of land and water for the benefit of every member of life on this earth. So World Wetland Day, which traditionally we are celebrating Now, from this year of 2022, it will be observed as United Nations International Wetland Day. So, why these wetlands are important? What are the different impacts that climate change activity or climate change scenario will pose as challenges before everything? A very interactive and self-explanatory slide I could get. That is the difference. What will be the difference if the climate change is responsible for the change in the temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius versus 2 degrees Celsius in the episodes of global warming? So if you see different corners, let us start from species. Whenever it is 1.5 degrees Celsius, we are expecting and we are anticipating, predicting, forecasting 6% of insects will be vanished, will be affected adversely, 8% of plants and 4% of vertebrates. These are the indicative diversity elements from the biodiversity. The slight change of zero point 0.5 degrees Celsius, and if we assume that there will be change of 2 degrees Celsius, you will find 18% from 6 to 18, from 8 to 16, and from 4 to 8, nearly double the impact will be there with just raise of zero point 0.5 degrees Celsius. Same is true with availability of water. So if you count urban resident and if you predict 350 millions of urban residents will be impacted and exposed to severe drought conditions if there is rise of temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius, vis-a-vis we have impact on 410 million urban residents if it is increased by 2 degrees Celsius. Sea level rise will affect 46 millions against 49 millions. The sea ice, that is very important indicator, which is happening in every 100 years, will tone down to 10 years in case of just rise of zero point 0.5 degrees Celsius. People, I could happily share this as an indicator. The number of hours we have spent in house, if you interact with your earlier generation, your father, the forefathers, and if you ask earlier generations, you will certainly get the idea that maximum number of hours within a day they could spend very nicely, happily outside their house. And who else than our generation will understand, especially with the background of this corona experience. We are spending so much hours in a house, and this is can be connected very easily with the climate change episode. So all these will have certainly impact on our health, our physical and mental health. Everything will be impacted directly or indirectly. We can connect ourselves with this climate change. And what is the cost of this? We really speaking, we cannot even count because we do not know still all the dimensions of this climate change. To combat with this critical situation, there are many efforts. One of such very important effort where wetlands are considered, and there are 17 goals, right from poverty and hunger to health to education to equality to social awareness to peace, and in between the technology driven aspects like this clean water, then sustainable cities, responsible consumption, all these 17 very important goals which are targeting the goal number 13, that is climate action. So all these remaining 16 goals will directly or indirectly will have some connection with this climate action. And as sir said, we have to do something. Every one of us can do something in order to combat, in order to stand strong against these climatic changes. Let us take couple of examples at this juncture. If you take marine and coastal ecosystem, what are the indicators of its vulnerability? What are the dangers? What are the problems? So over harvesting and commercial fishery we can consider as very important challenge for today's fishery. In fact, the entire concept of sustainable, the word sustainable development comes from the episode or experience that is related to fishery or mechanized commercial fishery. Habitats are destructed because of various coastal developments, and these are the prominent features of vulnerability. What are the impacts? There is increased loss of areas of coastal regions. There is very routine flooding episodes. There is high storm surge floods that are observed, intrusion of salinity or saline areas, so also the tidal influence inside the land area. There will be change in the temperature, which is very critical for the survival life and behavior of many creatures. Reduced sea ice cover. This is another important impact that are measurable, observed impacts. For this, what strategy we have to adopt that comes under adaptivity, so we can restore some of the very valuable, unique coastal ecosystems like mangroves, coral reefs, sea grasses, and there are many developed countries who have come out with very concrete planning and programs, stepwise programs to have to mitigate these drastic or severe impacts that we are facing about coastal systems. If you reach to polar systems, which are highly sensitive to with respect to, on one hand, limited amount of biodiversity, though it cannot be compared with the tropical biodiversity, but polar ecosystems have their own biodiversity. Most of us know about polar bears. Most of us are using them as the screensavers. The seals, the walruses, all their populations are impacted because of these polar systems. Because ice is melting, availability of food, availability of energy, availability of the chances of reproduction, everything is negatively impacted because of the climate change. And ultimately, that has affected the livelihood of people because it is undoubtedly changing the availability of food for them or for their survival. So commercial fishery and all that happens here, adaptivity, whenever we are talking like stresses of pollution or overutilization of natural resources, degradation of habitats, and all that has should come from the local people and their participation. As it is our responsibility to do something. Now, in many of the areas where we are talking about citizen scientists. So, what can be my contribution towards this climate change and its impact and monitoring strategy for biodiversity? That is very simple. Every Saturday, Sunday morning, you go out for 2 hours, take as many pictures, click your mobile photos, use the websites that are available, use the WhatsApp groups, and share these images that this is the bird which I have observed in this season for this year 2022. In 2023, what will happen, I do not know. So every time wise, space wise changes I can record, I can share, I can make a very nice document of it, and I can make it available for the knowledge of people. Now, whenever we come to agricultural ecosystem, out of around 7,000 varieties that are domesticated or improved by human being, today, by and large, we are using only 15 varieties globally or they are having commercial value. So what happens with the remaining varieties that we have developed? Forget about the wild races, forget about their natural relatives, forget about the local biological diversity. The diversity which we have used for commercial agricultural production is also facing severe problems with respect to changing water conditions, with respect to changing temperature conditions, of course, population. which is a root cause of all these damages and changes, increasing population and increasing demands with respect to food, water, energy. All this is negatively impacting on the surrounding. That can be stress in terms of heat, change rainfalls, leaching of nutrients due to heavy rains, erosion by wind or water, very frequent fire events that are occurring. All these are measurable, clear-cut indicator impacts. Adaptivity to this, we can seriously and sincerely work on greenhouse gases emissions. 20%, it is estimated that 20% of global greenhouse gas emission takes place through agriculture. So what are the improved systems that we can adopt? What is the betterment of soil and fertilizer use through its appropriate management we can adopt? All these strategies are very important whenever we are talking about sustenance of agriculture ecosystem. As connecting back to our understanding of wetlands, why they are important is because they are most productive systems. That is the home for biological diversity, because water is essential component of not only organism but each and every cell. Trillions of cells are present in our body, and all these cells have 60 to 70% of water in it. So without water, we cannot think of biological wealth, we cannot think of productivity, the ecological benefits that we are drawing, the economic gains that we are having from these wetlands, and our vital role that they are playing in our survival. So, as per the formal definition of wetlands, Ramsar has done uh, the sincere and honest efforts to cover each and every corner of this earth for these wetlands. But there are natural and anthropogenic stresses, limitations, challenges, and year on year they are remain neglected and exploited by many. So Ramsar Convention long back has given this particular thought of protecting these wetlands, and there should be global initiative. And one of the very prominent and important, all-inclusive, we can say, global treaty that or convention that it has, which talks about three important things: wise use of these wetlands at local and national levels, different actions for sustainable development, and its equitable benefit sharing. Also, wise use and conservation of wetlands becomes the theme for the protection of not only this as habitats, but as the uh, very important resource, natural resource for human life. So this Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Program stated that this degradation of environment is very prominent in case of wetland ecosystem. Though these wetlands occupy only 3% of the total land area, but they store almost double the total carbon that is accumulated in the forest lands. So, very important role that they are playing for today's world, carbon sequestration, which is becoming a very business term for the corporates. The ecological role that is played by these wetlands, it can be in the form of land builders, it can be flood controls, it can protect us from the coastal storms and surges, it can harbor the biological diversity, it provides corridors for livelihood to explore right from fishery up to the nutrient recharge, up to availability of water, up to tourism, up to recreation, n number of possible uh, mechanisms with which the wetlands are helping all of us. Whenever we are correlating us with the wetland and its diversity or systems that are present in our own country, there are different types of wetlands. Before that, just for our understanding, these are different ecosystems. You have marine ecosystem, you have uh, freshwater ecosystem, and intermediate we have brackish ecosystems. So what is present in the freshwater different areas? We have free flowing examples, we have stagnant examples, we have man-made wetlands, we have natural wetlands, we have seasonal wetlands like puddles. Most of you have heard about Karst Plateau, wherein you must have seen almost 6 to 7 months in the year they remain as, or they are treated traditionally as wetlands, becomes wetlands for the monsoon months. So in India, which the total area occupied by the wetlands is amounts to be around 5% of the total land, and out of total counted wetlands, we are fortunate to have Nandur Madhmeshwar, which is at the boundary line of Nashik and Ahmednagar district, and Lonar, which is part of Buldhana district. These two are the Ramsar sites. In addition to that, efforts are there to declare wetlands, to understand their significance, and to give local protection. So, in all, for India, we are now with 42 Ramsar sites as on 2021, and four are recently added, very recently in this year itself, as new wetlands in the catalog of wetlands in India. So, these are the four: Vindavas, then Sultanpur, Thol Lake, and Vadhwana. These are the four wetlands. In this year, we should be proud to say that 2022 has offered us these four wetlands of international importance. Whenever I want to correlate this concept of climate change with relation to these wetlands, I have to count it very rationally in terms of the impact of climate change process, and wetlands are day by day becoming very vulnerable. At the same time, wetlands have their own uh, mechanisms to mitigate certain impacts of climate change. So, wetlands are required to fight with the adverse impacts of climate change. At the same time, they are suffering from various ill impacts or ill effects of climate change. So, vulnerability on one side, and mitigation strategies and mechanism or strength on the other side is the real kind of dilemma which these wetlands are handling. So drought, for example, drought conditions might shift these roles of wetlands because they are locally or traditionally known as carbon sinks. As we have said, double than the total amount of carbon that is sequestered by the forest is sinked in these wetlands. But because of this drought, where there is no availability and thus interaction of water with the soil, these areas are instead of being sinks, they are becoming carbon sources. So this transformation, this shift can be very serious in the days to come whenever we are talking and understanding more about the climate change. Higher temperature and more rains, they are the very important what we can say triggering mechanisms whenever we are talking about wetlands as carbon sinks. So we have to have good control and balance on temperature and rainfall. So there is a critical level of water for each wetland. Just next to our IITM premises, we have very beautiful Pashan Lake, which is the identified wetland in on the map of Pune city. So what we are doing, what as an institute we can do, what as an individual we can do for this small as a small contribution for the protection of this wetland. Can I do something in order to prevent the wastewater that is reaching to these beautiful sites? Can I do something to avoid the solid waste that are reaching to these sites? Can I do something where people and other layman can come and get associated, get trained, get impressed because of the diversity that is present in the wetlands. So all these can be our small contributions for the conservation of wetlands. I think each one of us can do something. We can use the uh, if I'm an engineer and I'm working in, say, remote sensing and GIS, can I map the temporal changes and spatial changes that are taking place in my wetland? Can I do something? Can I take the soil? Can I analyze that? Can I comment on the water holding capacity of the sediment? Can I talk about the plant diversity? Can I work on algae? Can I work on diatoms? Can I use them as indicator of pollution? All these are the possible contributions as a person from scientific background. So it is not that we cannot do anything if I am expertise or if I am having expertise in literature. Can I make some slogans for people to understand the significance? Can I write a poem? Can I refer a chapter? Can I write a book? Can I do the valuation of wetland? Can I easily see one very simple along the lake? Suppose there is an apartment. At the time of construction itself, it is bifurcated into two areas. One is the lake facing flats or balconies, and non-lake facing balconies. And obviously, the lake facing balconies will cost more. So all these natural benefits, add-on charges, add-on value of all these natural things is possible for these wetlands. So for climate mitigation and adaptation strategies, we have to understand and appreciate that wetlands regulate, capture, and store the greenhouse gases. Very importantly, the carbon dioxide, the methane. But if we fail to uh, protect these wetlands, then they can become or they can transform themselves as methane source. So they can release carbon dioxide, they can release methane, which can contribute in the process of climate change once again. So it is kind of vicious cycle. So we have to do something for wetlands at the background of climate change for mitigation or as mitigation strategies, anticipating all positive and negative impacts on these wetlands. So because they are the natural, only natural protection that can provide us food, that can provide us water, that can shelter us. Mangroves, for example, are the best natural shelters for all the coastal regions, which we have experienced in 2004 against this tsunami. Very recently, up to 2020, we have experienced different. Every year on year, there are problems, and only these green guards, natural green guards, are uh, storing this, protecting us. They are protecting our areas, the sediments to get washed off from the terrestrial side. They are known as land builders. They can be used for the treatment of our waste. So wetlands are nicely used. If you happen to hear some case studies from Delhi, a couple of wetlands the government has taken as to use them as the sewage treatment plants, and very nicely through natural process without investment of any energy, with the availability of sunlight, air, and biological activity. Such wetlands are the platforms, are becoming transformed into the platforms to change everything from the polluted sites to or polluted waste sewage to usable plant, this instead of mechanical or chemical treatment. Such treatments are encouraged and facilitated. Availability of water, recharging of groundwater, you name different types of aspects with these wetlands or associated with these wetlands, and we are getting the clues from the nature. At this juncture, I think we have to uh, thank uh, these natural gifts given to us in the form of wetlands to talk something about nurturing biological diversity, at the same time doing something to protect not only you and me, but for this entire life on this earth. So I take this opportunity to thank all the officials from IITM who have extended this platform to interact with all of you as nature lovers and eager to do something for the protection and conservation of wetlands and biodiversity. Thank you so much. I would be happy to answer some of the questions if you have in this.
Thank you, sir, for such an enlightening and informative talk. We had only basic knowledge about climate change and biodiversity, but after your in-depth talk, we have gained an insight on the impact of climate change on a species, their behavior, pollution, population, and ecosystem. Our attendees definitely will gain much from your talk. But we have received many questions from viewers, but due to lack of time, we cannot take all questions now. But if you have any questions, mail us on iitm-env@nic.in, which will be conveyed to Dr. Shindikar. So I would like to thank Dr. Shindikar again for being our chief guest for International Day for Biological Diversity 2022. Thanks to all our viewers. I sincerely thank the director of IITM for giving us all necessary permissions. I also thank our computer division and IT support. I sincerely appreciate your attention and interest in today's event. Now I conclude this session. Stay safe, stay curious. Have a good day to all.